a good week so far. Anyway, let's take a look at what I've put up on the Edmodo site. Yeah, on the latest media articles. Yeah. All right, let's take a look. I think you saw this, right? With regard to NATO having a talk with holding talks with Russia, right? And basically, they are warning that there is actually a real risk of armed conflict, right? Real risk for a new armed conflict in Europe because they ended without actually um, coming up with, resolving any of the issues that Russia had put on the table. Because basically Russia doesn't wants a guaranteed end to NATO expansion, and of course NATO doesn't want that, right? And they were also calling for. I mean, Russia is also calling for the withdrawal of NATO troops in former Soviet bloc countries that joined the alliance after 1997. These two proposals were not acceptable to the US and NATO allies. So it's been um, quite a tense discussion between Russia and NATO. Okay, this came out. This next media article from SCMP came out this morning. As you know, China is trying to move towards. I mean, has actually been going with a zero COVID mandate, right? So today it had suspended 6 flights from the U.S. to Shanghai and Guangzhou. So that is part of the reason is because um, it had found passengers who tested positive for COVID. So the U.S. of course is unhappy with that. Biden has actually, I think, also weighed in on it and is threatening a tit for tat. I think. Yeah. Okay, Mali. Again, another one facing Mali, as you know, has been facing quite a bit of sanctions. Yeah, so it's and the sanctions is actually isolating it even further, um, and it's regional countries, neighboring countries have also cancelled flights to Mali. Yeah, part of the reason is because of the military coup, right? Because the military has not actually um, has not uh, lived up to its promise, right, to hold democratic elections. And so these neighboring countries, as well as France, has actually imposed sanctions on Mali. So that's basically isolating Mali quite a bit, yeah, in the hopes that it will be pushed to hold elections. Yeah. Okay, Nicaragua, as you know, it's been facing sanctions from U.S., EU, for its human rights records, its human rights violations, as well as corruption, and its undermining of democracy. And so, just recently, Nicaragua had held its elections, presidential elections, and the president Daniel Ortega is sworn in for his fourth consecutive term on Monday. Yep. So, because of the sanctions from U.S. and EU, as you know, Nicaragua recently switched alliances and has now recognized China, yeah, instead of Taiwan. So China actually sent a delegation because recently established ties with Nicaragua, right? So they sent a delegation to the presidential inauguration. Okay, so Iran uh, has sanctioned 50 Americans, and in return, Washington has also warned Iran, right? And basically said that the U.S. will protect and defend its citizens, and that if Iran were to attack any of their nationals, it would face consequence. So basically, they had, Iran had announced sanctions on people like a couple of U.S. citizens and also prominent leaders like the Joint Chiefs of Staff, Miley, for their Milley, sorry, for the role in the death of Qasem Soleimani, the Iranian commander that was assassinated during Trump's watch, right, during Trump's administration. Okay, so Iran is actually making its diplomatic visits, doing a regional tour. The foreign minister is on a regional tour, um, and it's gone to Qatar. It's also going to. It's probably in China. He's probably in China right now. China, as you see in the next media article, China is hosting the Iranian foreign minister, right? And the visit comes after I think 4 out of 6 of the GCCs is visiting China, right, at the start of the week. So the GCC countries, right, the Gulf Cooperation Council countries, um, the their delegations were in China early this week, and then following that, Iran was going to be also visiting. The Iranian foreign minister was going to be visiting China. So basically, this is seen as a move by China to actually step up its engagement in the Middle East, right? Further step up its engagement in the Middle East because it does have good relations with the Arab nations as well as Iran and Israel. So it's basically probably you can see this as a China trying to further its ties with Middle East, especially with the US, right, pivoting towards Indo-Pacific and basically withdrawing its or turning its attention from the Middle East to the Indo-Pacific. Yeah, so it is probably trying to, um, China is probably trying to forge strong ties with the Middle Eastern countries at this point in time. Okay, China, looking at Afghanistan, right? And you will notice that Afghanistan is actually, it is a neighboring country, right? And of course, China is basically watchful because of the possibility of the impact on its national security through um, the Uyghurs, right? China is actually worried about terrorist groups, right, in Afghanistan actually um, sponsoring the Uyghurs, yeah, and basically helping them um, to break away from China. So China is also looking at Afghanistan as an investment, right? Because Afghanistan does have quite a bit of rare minerals, rare earth minerals, and it is also some observers have seen said is that Afghanistan is like the missing piece in China's BRI. Yeah? So if it is able to actually invest and help stabilize Afghanistan, there's a possibility that um, China's economic you know uh, diplomacy, right, would take off, and it would also help with the BRI as well. Okay, so this is actually quite an interesting article in Nikkei Asia. Yeah. Okay, interestingly, Iran says that it's not officially recognizing Taliban, right? Even though it's been in constant contact with Taliban. Um, Yeah, basically, Iran is saying that the current condition of Afghanistan is a major concern to it, and even though they did have basically discussions, right, it doesn't signal that it is willing to recognize Taliban. It will only do so if the Taliban manage to form an inclusive government. Okay, Bangladesh. So last week we talked about minor powers or small powers, small states, right? Weak states. So this would be a good case study if you're looking at a minor power, right? Small power. You could actually look at Bangladesh and how the role it's playing in South Asia. So basically, it's I mean this diplomat the diplomat article is basically looking at Bangladesh within its geographical locale. So it's also related to what we're talking about today, with regard to geographical terrain, the geography that the state is locked into, right? It's surrounded by India on three sides, and so it has to maintain a relationship, right, between I mean, it has to be friends, right, with India. It has to be friends also with Pakistan, right? So it's actually uh, playing quite a successful diplomatic game, according to Hassan Ahmad Shovon. Okay. All right, Kazakhstan. As you know, Russia was in Kazakhstan, um, helping to bring law and order, right? Because of the protests last week, and Kazakhstan had reached out to the security, um, the security arrangement with Russia and former Soviet states. Basically, with that, of course, U.S. had something to say. Blinken said that one lesson of recent history is that once Russians are in your house, it's sometimes very difficult to get them to leave. Right. So Russia was, of course, unhappy about that jibe, and basically said that. Well, if Anthony Blinken loves history lessons so much, then he should take the following into account. When Americans are in your house, it can be difficult to stay alive and not be robbed or raped. We are taught this not only by the recent past, but by all 300 years of American statehood. So it's a war of words, as you can see. Yeah. So Kazakhstan had actually requested support from the Collective Security Treaty Organization, which is an alliance of ex-Soviet states, including Russia. And 2 days ago, Kazakhstan president had announced that Russia will be pulling out in 2 days' time, which means by today. Yeah. So that would end the short military intervention, right, by that treaty, right, by the states involved in the treaty. Okay. Then we have George Yeo talking about U.S.-China rivalry and the role that Singapore can play. Yeah, so again, a minor state, trying, figuring out, the change in the external environment, how not to be caught in between, and to at at the same time be able to maintain sovereignty. So he's suggesting that Singapore reconnects with its Southeast Asian neighbors and to establish its own identity where being Singaporean means being bigger than just a nationality. Okay? So that's his suggestion for Singapore. And then I have three more articles here on rare earths because I mean, if you want to talk about material environment, right, rare earths would be the new frontier or the next frontier, right? If you have been following the discussions on rare earths, you realize that um, China actually has quite a monopoly on rare earths, which can be, I mean, basically it's the input, right, to things like the electric vehicles, um, modern technology, right, would also need rare earths. So this would be probably, where basically, you know, China would actually, start to have a first movers advantage, right? Having actually, have had quite a bit of head start over the US. Yeah. So rare earth has actually become a fundamental part of modern life. So it's used in things like cell phones, computers, televisions, and of course electric cars. And then of course modern medical devices and green energy, right, is also based on um, rare earths. So this is actually going to be quite a huge thing. I mean, if you think about the future, right? The move towards you know green technology, sustainable energy, um, military technology using drones, etc. Right? This would be basically the frontier, right? The next industry. I mean, the huge industry. Yeah. So you will find that actually about 40% of the rare earth reserves currently are being exploited are actually in Chinese mines, right? So even though it's the majority is elsewhere, China has actually become a leading importer um, of ore and its concentrates. So this actually, the fact that they have actually also merged three of its top companies, right, into one, right, that's under overseen by the Chinese state regulators. That also ensures that China is able to streamline um, its its production, its extraction of these rare earths, and so it's going to be able to compete much more effectively as well. Okay, so these are basically the media articles I have for you today. I don't know if you guys saw anything else that I need to add in, but if you want to, you can add it to the list. Yeah, just hit reply or add comment, right, and just list your news articles there. Okay. All right. Any questions so far, or anything else that we need to bring in and discuss for this for today's media articles, list of media articles? Okay, so I'm assuming not, eh? All right, so shall I move on and start the lecture proper? Okay, so we're going to be moving on. I mean, we are actually moving on to block 8 today, and I'm going to actually finish up block 8 today as well. I realized that last week when I was asking you to read those articles, right? In the end, I didn't actually pull from those. I pulled from the subject guide, right? Older subject guide, as well as Christopher Hill. Yeah. So if you want to look for the readings, right, for today, I only pulled from two places. I pulled from basically um, the I can't remember which chapter was it, but it's in the subject guide. Yeah, let me see. Chapter 7 of the subject guide. Okay, it's the role of the external environment. Yeah, and then also I believe it's also chapter 7 of Christopher Hill's book. Okay, so these are basically the two main readings for today. All right. Okay, so the learning outcomes for block 8 is basically this. By the end of this chapter, or by the end of this block rather, you should be able to discuss and evaluate the influence of the external environment on foreign policy. You should be also able to describe and evaluate the role of material factors and international political factors in foreign policy formulation, and then discuss the problems with determinism and choice in foreign policy. Okay, so when you look at Hill, right, the way what he said was basically when we talk about the external environment, he says external does not mean just those things outside the territorial boundaries of an actor. It means all those things which are outside the social and political processes by which the actor comes to his choices. Yeah, so anything that basically impinges on his policy choices. Okay, so if you look at Hill, basically how he actually defines the external environment is that it is where you actually observe the interplay, right, the interaction between material and human factors, and the extent to which states are limited by the web of institutions, rules, and expectations which they inhabit. So the external environment would be, I mean, if you think about um, material environment, that would be the physical environment that we are in, the ecological environment, the geographical environment, the resources that the state has access to and is able to exploit. Yeah, and and also what he calls the web of institutions, rules, and expectations would be the international political environment. Yeah, so it's actually the external environment is actually made up of two things. And so basically, what this external environment encompasses is what Hadley Bull actually refers to as the anarchical society, right? It basically is, where you see that, especially with regard to the international political environment, it is the elements of cooperation and conflict which coexist uneasily because that there are tensions, and yet you need to work through the tensions to cooperate with each other in order to achieve, right, your national interest, to in order to fulfill your national interest, right? So it basically highlights the fact that you need to cooperate, right? And you may also come into conflict with other states, right? And we need to know how to coexist in this system. Yeah. So basically, it says that, Hadley Boo says that when you look at the system, it looks different because of where the actor is positioned within the system. So Alexander Wendt also talks about society or anarchy, right? And he says that basically society or anarchy is what states make of it. So in other words, right, as state actors, as representatives of states as well, in terms of the foreign policy officials and foreign policy decision makers, they do have agency to shape the environment, but they are also constrained, right, by the range of ideas that they may have, their perception, their political will, and the material factors that are at their disposition, right? Whatever natural as well as human resources that these political actors or these foreign policy actors and decision makers can call upon. Right? So, one of the things you also will realize is that the international system is not a cohesive system. There's distinct patchiness in the international system. Some, um, some, there may be some levels where might see that there is a more elaborated um, agreement or arrangement, right, between states in their international relations, more elaborated arrangements of cooperations between states. But there could also be less elaborated um, sorts of arrangements between states as well. So it actually you see this passions across the international system. So there's varying levels of concreteness of regimes, right, that actually encourage cooperation and conflict. And as a result, you also see fragmentation, you also see solidarity, right, between states. So this patchiness in the international system actually both enables and constrains the agency of the actors. Enables in effect in the sense that it actually provides some opportunities, right? There are opportunities that can be exploited, but at the same time, these regimes can also constrain the actors' agency, their ability to act on what they want, on how they how they want the policy to be implemented. Yeah. Okay, so when we look at Hill, right, basically he talks about the external environment as being made up of two spheres. One is the material environment, right, which basically we will associate with the physical, geographical, natural resource kinds of environment, and then there's the political environment of the international system, right? So this would be what you would associate with maybe international organizations, bilateral, multilateral arrangements. So each of these spheres actually constrain and limit the foreign policy of states in terms of both their, the power, their ability to exercise power, and their ability to basically implement the ideas that they may have. Okay, so the material environment is basically what you would associate with the state's topography and terrain. So basically, geographic position. It's the natural resources that reside within its territorial boundaries, right? And these are actually key determinants of a state's foreign policy, right? It is what actually determines what are the strengths and weaknesses of a state, where it may be vulnerable, where it may actually um, you know, not be, it may actually have a more better position than its neighboring countries. So you see that in terms of Britain, right? Um, it is an island, right? It basically exploited or noted that because it's an island, it needs to basically in, build on its maritime power, and so its maritime power grew. It became an empire as a result. Right? It went outwards and it sought colonies in other parts of the world. Yeah. Whereas in terms of U.S., right, you find that the U.S. is able to keep um, its no to be isolated, right, from any the external impact, external environment does any dynamics in the external environment doesn't really impact it because of its relative physical distance and separation from the different continents, Europe and Asia. Right, so its isolationism is actually a result of its physical distance and its separateness. It's in terms of geography from Europe and Asia. So that actually explains also part of the reason why US was able to practice an isolationist kinds of policies for a while, right, before it became engaged globally, right? Okay, let's take a look. This is actually looking at North Korea, right? Its positioning, its geographic positioning, and how that makes it a challenge for North Korea, right, in terms of its ability to um, you know, exploit its material environment.
The Democratic People's Republic of Korea, or North Korea, lies on a peninsula extending outward from Northeast Asia. The country borders China and Russia to the north, the Republic of Korea to the south, and Japan across the sea to the east. North Korea's primary geographic challenge is securing its northern and southern borders from the threat of its much larger regional neighbors. The Kema Plateau and Hamgyong Mountains comprise much of the northern border region, providing a strong but not unbreachable geographic barrier. The Taebaek Mountains run along the east coast, limiting the potential for invasion from the sea. Since the time of earlier northern Korean kingdoms, including Goguryeo, the Dandong-Siniju Gap across the Yalu River in the northwest and the wide Imjin-Han River Valley in the south leave the country vulnerable, particularly with the lack of geographic barriers along the north-south axis. North Korea's mountains do provide ample hydropower, and the country has numerous natural mineral resources and coal, but its terrain and climate limit agricultural activity. Given its larger neighbors, North Korea has two core imperatives. It must secure its southern and northern borders via political accommodation, defensive lines, or outward expansion, and it must engender a strong sense of national unity and exploit differences amongst its neighbors to balance external political pressure. From the launching of the Korean War to the heavily fortified DMZ, from the exploitation of relations between China and Russia to the development of a nuclear deterrent, North Korea's actions, in many ways, are shaped by similar constraints and pressures felt by its predecessor kingdoms due to its location and geography.
Okay, so hopefully that sort of like explains why, right? We observe the sorts of policies that North Korea takes towards its neighboring countries. Okay, so you'll find that state's resource endowment, right, which would be both natural resources as well as human resources, actually determines its level of dependency on trade. And so it does. It also collectively determines its level of economic development, and whether or not it does have the capacity to convert these into effective foreign policy tools. Okay, so we were talking about rare earths just now, right? And of course, I mentioned that 40% of rare earths actually is residing in China's mines, but of course, it has also reached out to the rest of the world and got its and is importing quite a bit right now. Yeah. So this is actually a video looking at why its control of rare earths actually matters.
Rare earths are essential for high-tech products, everything from electric vehicles to mobile phones and even fighter jets. However, China dominates the supply chain, and as relations between the US and China deteriorate, Western countries fear they don't have an alternative, which could have serious implications for the future of manufacturing. Rare earths are a group of 17 metallic elements with obscure names such as lanthanum and terbium. They are actually relatively plentiful in the Earth's crust. However, their geochemical qualities mean they tend to be widely dispersed, making them relatively difficult to mine and process profitably, hence the name. As a group, they tend to have high melting and boiling points, but it is when they react with other elements that they become really useful. In fact, they are indispensable for many electronic, optical and magnetic applications, and currently irreplaceable for modern devices such as electric vehicles and mobile phones. They are also vital for the defense industry. Half a century ago, the Mountain Pass mine in California was the world's leading source of rare earths. But a successful push by Beijing to become the global leader in the sector means it now produces about 80% of the world's rare earths. The sharp deterioration in relations between the US and China is fueling concerns that Beijing could cut off the supply. In July, China threatened to impose sanctions on Lockheed Martin, the biggest US arms manufacturer. This has prompted the US, Australia and the EU to step up efforts to create an alternative supply chain. Currently, there is just one major non-Chinese supplier of rare earths, Lynas, an Australian-listed company. But Lynas can only handle the so-called light rare earths at its Malaysian processing facility, leaving Western companies totally reliant on Chinese suppliers for heavy rare earths. In July, the Pentagon provided funding to Lynas and US-based MP Materials to design heavy rare earth processing facilities that could be based in the US. The US and Australian governments have also signed an agreement to source new rare earth deposits to boost security of supply. The task of establishing a non-Chinese supply chain will not be easy, however. Even though rare earths are relatively abundant, the process of separating them poses technical and environmental challenges. China's dominance of the market enables it to control prices and put pressure on challengers. Beijing's Made in China 2025 strategy is to create a vertically integrated supply chain that dominates mining, magnets and high-tech manufacturing, such as electric vehicles. But an increasing number of Western experts say this is exactly why the West needs to begin producing its own supply of rare earths, and also the high-performance magnets required to power the digital age.
Okay, that sounds ominous, yeah? All right, so as you saw, Taliban, right, basically took over Afghanistan, right, and it will actually have an impact on the mining of rare earth minerals in Afghanistan. So this particular interview, right, that this media organization actually did was actually looking at how China will come into play, right? And also the geopolitics that is changing as a result of um, this the Taliban's takeover of Afghanistan. I thought that video says that the Linus is still processing in Kuantan, right, in Malaysia. Yeah, but they are only able to process the light rare earths. So I think they are still operating in Kuantan. Yeah, I mean, the thing is, Linus is, I think, is it Australian, is it? Um, but I don't think they are doing it in, I mean, because I mean, if you look at it, it sounds like it's very toxic, right? The processing and all that. So they might have actually basically um, outsourced the processing to Malaysia and set up its plant in Malaysia. Yeah. Okay, so let's take a look at this interview.
What do we know about Afghanistan, lithium, and rare earth minerals?
Yeah, thanks, Brian. Thanks for having me on. We've known since 2010 about the significant minerals endowment that Afghanistan holds. What's really in it, the value has gone from $1 trillion to $3 trillion in rare earth elements, lithium, some of the critical minerals that really are necessary to power the clean energy future and really control the commanding heights of the new economy. So we've known about this endowment for quite some time. What's really been a headwind against the development of those resources was one, demand wasn't what it is today, and secondly, the poor governance issues in Afghanistan, the evolving rule of law, all created a headwind against investment, and there are other better places to invest. That's all changing now in the context of this exponential demand increase given the clean energy transition and also the Taliban now in firm control of government in Afghanistan.
Right now, these rare earth minerals, primarily their processing, as we've talked about, is about 85% controlled by China because they saw the future decades ago. They got ahead of us, and they really control that part of its story we've been talking about a lot here on CNBC. Do you think, or do you believe that China will reach out, try to cozy up to the Taliban with its eyes on some of these resources?
Yeah, Brian, I think there's 2 points. There's one, the supply side of the equation, which you're speaking to, but there's also the geopolitical context in which China wants to engage with Afghanistan. China, as well as Russia, have already made diplomatic overtures to the Taliban, so we already know that's in train. What China's most focused on is, as you noted, continuing their dominance in rare earth elements processing, refining. But they're also interested principally in stability, political stability, and regional stability, and also to secure their considerable Belt and Road investments they've already made in Pakistan. What is increasingly concerning aren't just the diplomatic overtures, but also this increasing rapprochement with the Taliban, where the Taliban has actually said that Chinese repression, the Chinese Communist Party's repression of its Muslim population, is an internal China matter. And also that they welcomed Chinese investment in helping the development of Afghanistan. So China is already starting the machinations of Belt and Road expansion into Afghanistan,
Yeah.
and the mineral wealth allows for investment justification.
And the one thing that China has done in the past is they have gone into impoverished nations, primarily like the Congo, and they have said, hey, let us in. We're going to give you a bunch of money. We're going to extract these minerals. You'll get a big cut, and then we're going to ship the minerals back to China for processing. Afghanistan, obviously, right now with the Taliban, who knows what their leadership wants to do or will do and whether or not there's any infrastructure to do it. But China could provide the funding for that. Do you think we will see China, and to your point, Russia, come in with cash for the country and say, let us in, we'll take the minerals, you'll get a cut, but we'll do all the work?
Absolutely. I think China is laying literally the groundwork to develop those roads and those export avenues back to China. This, again, geopolitically, one is the market context. China makes decisions not based on quarterly statements and annual returns. They make decisions for the very long term and through a geopolitical lens. They don't answer to shareholders like your viewers, many of your viewers do. They're responsive to what the party dictates. And so they're looking at things not just through that commercial lens, but through the geopolitical. I think they're already starting to lay that groundwork for just this kind of investment. And I can envisage here a Taliban protectorate, security zones for Chinese mining camps in country. What I think is really important here, the answer that, as you mentioned, we're playing catch up to China in this question. What I think we have to do as the West and free nations everywhere, we need to band together to say countries they will not accept minerals for the clean energy transition or for anything based on repressive regimes. We did this before. We expanded our economic security of free nations together in the context of apartheid South Africa, where the world said we are not going to accept doing business with a regime that represses its population. This takeover of Afghanistan by the Taliban is a clarion call to step up that same kind of leadership in the world. And we cannot accept these minerals to be exploited by a country that represses half its population.
Okay. What do you think of his recommendation? Do you think it's workable? His recommendation that we can make sure that we don't get our minerals from places where the state actually represses its people. Where else? Yeah, exactly. Won't be possible. Yeah, exactly. That's what I would also assume. It will take some time also for them to get their act together, right? Okay, I actually was going to um, also just maybe play this other video for you guys as well. Let me just get that link for you. kind of bias coming from a corporate advisor. But that's what they did with diamonds, right? I mean, yeah, the mining of diamonds is in Africa, isn't it? Yeah, that's one of the things about rare earths is it's toxic. Yeah, right. Yeah. And of course, democratic countries or democratic states would not want that to be in their backyard, right? So I'm surprised that actually the um, Linus is actually cooperating with what was it that he said MEP um, MPE, is it the company in the US, and they're going to be building uh, a processing plant in the US, which is surprising, isn't it? Because it's going to be um, quite toxic. Yeah. Okay, I have another one that I was going to show. I think it might be it might repeat slightly, but it is also another CNBC. Or is it MSNBC? I think it's CNBC. Yes, it's another CNBC video interview, but I thought it was quite interesting as well. So,
I mean, what's really interesting is that we think about, problems in the region potentially affecting oil. This is not in any way really at this point an energy story. This is really, I think, much more a story about the sort of new energy revolution. I mean, the Taliban potentially has access to $1 to $3 trillion worth of critical mineral endowments in Afghanistan. And I think that is sort of the big play is, can they develop this resource? How critical will this resource be for funding the Taliban? Is China looking, by recognizing the Taliban, to potentially gain control over this resource, particularly the lithium deposits there? So I think that's the really big economic story going forward is it's the critical mineral endowment in Afghanistan.
So should we be watching China? And what do you make of the outreach by the Chinese government to the Taliban? Where does that go? What does it mean for the U.S.?
What's really interesting is there was a meeting on July 28th between the Chinese foreign minister and senior Taliban officials. And we think about which government was quick to recognize the Taliban. It was China. I mean, China potentially is looking to, not only develop, lithium deposits in Afghanistan, they're looking to expand the Belt and Road Initiative to Afghanistan. And the really big question is, will this be about a bigger play on the part of China to solidify their control over the supply chain for renewables, for the critical components for, the batteries, the rechargeable batteries? So I think this is going to be the interesting story is what is China's broader strategic outreach to this government?
Well, of course, it seems to me the bottom line of this conversation is that why wouldn't China exert itself in that region more so than it's been before? And maybe that's one of the calculations that we didn't think enough about before we made the abrupt move that we seemed to do.
I mean, there was some discussion, though, about China having their own internal security problems with the Uyghurs. And the question is, would they potentially fear that the Taliban could somehow embolden this type of group in China, which is seen as a very big domestic security threat? And the Taliban has come out and essentially said, you know what, how China deals with the Uyghurs is their own internal issue. So I think China for now is looking at this saying we potentially benefit from having this relationship with the Taliban. But they will be concerned, obviously, about any instability coming over into China because of the Taliban. I think we should obviously, though, be watching the situation in Pakistan, the fact that Pakistan is a nuclear-armed nation. The Taliban has worked very closely with extremist groups there. I think from a broader security perspective, that is a very troubling relationship we need to be watching. And that is, I think, the biggest story on the security front is what happens in Pakistan.
okay, so a lot of talk about geopolitics, right? So one of the things that we always talk about is geopolitics and how it dependency theory. Yes, yeah, you actually see that world systems theory comes in, right? Wallerstein, yes. So it seems like we are actually seeing it happening again, right? It's but at least it's something that you've probably learned quite a bit, and probably now you have a lot more new examples to illustrate. Okay, so you see that geopolitics actually is referring to the state's power to control a space or territory and to basically shape the foreign policy of individual states so that they can influence the individual states' foreign policy in a way that it will benefit them and also to basically define the international political relations. So one of the things we notice is that not all states are created equally. There are unequal distribution of resources, and also the specific geographical locale of a state would necessarily make some states clear winners and others losers. Right. So this traditionally, right, in traditional IR has always been the justification for aggressive foreign policies of conquest. Because when you conquer, you actually are able to bring the territory under your control. You can extract it as much, in whatever way, form you want to, as long as you're the state, right? You're the overarching state. So this you see that there's actually that deterministic approach to foreign policy, right? Where you basically say that okay, if you have the resources, you would actually have power, right? So in order to build power, you can conquer. Yeah? So one of the things that geopolitics is also concerned with is how economics and technology can actually modify geographical factors, such as, and when we talk about geographical factors, we're actually talking about the territory, the population, the strategic location, where the state is located, natural resource endowments. And if how economics and technology is able to modify this can actually affect the relations between states and their struggle for world dominance. So you'll notice that over time, right, humans have learned to use leverage technology, right, and to use it to basically maybe um, create economic advantage, right? Even when they are disadvantaged by some of by their lot, right? By the way that they are endowed with certain natural resources. So they have actually, I mean, humans have actually been able to use the latest technologies to alter, right? Alter nature, right? The geographical um, landscape, right? And also and as a result, right, they are able to um, open up new economic opportunities and possibilities. So this is what the Sprouts call environmental possibilism. And so one example of this would be like the Suez Canal. It is, as you know, a man-made waterway, and it was basically launched in 1869, and that actually connects the Mediterranean Sea to the Red Sea. And as a result of this canal, it actually created the shortest maritime route from Europe to Asia. So yeah, no, basically it's man over geography, right? Man over nature. You're able to basically, um, you know, make things a little bit. I mean, extract economic possibilities out of something that would have been seen as hampering your ability and your capacity, right? In terms of economic growth. Yeah. So okay, so yeah, ever given. That was early this year, right? Oh, early last year, rather. Yeah. So foreign policy decision makers definitely cannot ignore, right, the state's physical terrain and environment, and you will find that they need to factor these into their foreign policy decision making. Okay, so as you know, Suez Canal, right? It was actually a one-way street or one-way waterway. But Egypt actually in I think it was 2015, 2016, 2015. It expanded the Suez Canal, made it a two-way waterway. So this is actually a video that looks at the announcement.
Well, Egypt is making history this morning. The country is officially unveiling a major expansion of the Suez Canal. The massive public works project will have a big impact on international trade and global security. Alex Ortiz is on the banks of the canal. Security prevented him from getting in front of a camera, so he's joining us on the phone. Alex, good morning.
Good morning. Egyptians in their thousands have gathered here to celebrate what some are calling their fourth pyramid. The Suez Canal expansion is just as much about boosting the economy as it is a matter of national pride.
Egyptians had something to show off this morning, inviting presidents and kings to the banks of the Suez Canal to celebrate what they're calling Egypt's gift to the world. The $8 billion expansion adds an extra lane and widens and deepens one of the busiest waterways on Earth. We visited during the building. This is one of the main arteries of global trade. Already, nearly 10% of the world's traffic passes through here, and the government says that once construction is complete, its capacity will be even greater. Construction was supposed to take 3 years, but workers labored day and night, dredging and digging, and finished in 12 months. President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi promises the project will bring much-needed jobs and revenue to an economy battered by years of political unrest. Here's how. Previously, ships could only traverse the canal one direction at a time. The average trip took 18 hours. Its expansion introduces two-way traffic and cuts journey times down by almost half. And in shipping, time is money. When it opened in 1869, Suez was a revolutionary creation, a shortcut between East and West. Ships traveling between Europe and Asia no longer had to sail all the way around Africa.
The Suez Canal, lifeline of Europe, in a dramatic sequence of events, became a cause of war.
Over the years, countries have gone to war for control over the canal.
Israeli troops struck down the Sinai Peninsula.
In what became known as the Suez Crisis, in 1956, France, England, and Israel invaded, hoping to win the waterway, but were soon forced to withdraw under U.S. and Soviet pressure. Since then, Suez has grown into a potent symbol of Egyptian pride and independence, and a strategic military channel. U.S. naval vessels enjoy priority access, allowing for quicker deployment in a volatile region.
So just moments ago, Alex Ortiz was able to get in front of the camera. He joins us now. Alex, I would imagine you had a very daunting morning.
Hi, good morning. Yeah, well, the place is on lockdown, and the security here are on high alert. They've mobilized tens of thousands of soldiers and policemen to protect the canal for fear that it might come under attack by Islamic State-linked militants. Charlie?
So what happened to you?
Well, security is deployed throughout the canal zone. The president is transiting down the canal at this very moment on an old royal yacht restored just for that purpose. So the number of VIPs and world dignitaries and the importance of the global significance of the canal really speaking to the level of security they brought out for the occasion.
Thanks, Alex.
Great reporting. Thank you, Alex.
Very good. Alex Ortiz in Egypt.
Okay, so that is Suez Canal. And of course, I mean, in terms of technological advancements, you also know that you are able to transcend geography and basically develop substitutes for natural resources. So transcending geography, an example that would be ICBMs, right? The intercontinental ballistic missiles and the satellite technology. Okay, so I had a couple of questions that I wanted you all to think about. Yeah, this is in relation to the Taliban takeover and how that's altered the external environment for its neighboring countries, China, Russia, and Pakistan, and also changes to geopolitics as a result. You can actually think about what we had seen in those two videos on rare earths rather, because China and Russia are actually quite keen, right, to get their hands on it, and they are also the only states, I think, besides Iran and Pakistan, that still maintain an embassy in Kabul. So that's one thing to think about, right? How has that, you know, uh, Taliban being, not actually recognized yet as a legitimate state, legitimate government of Afghanistan, but yet, right, having um, these arrangements with its neighboring countries. How are they? Because it's a reality, it's a political reality, right? That they need to grapple with, right? Because they are actually neighboring. They share borders with Afghanistan. They cannot basically ignore Taliban. Unlike the U.S., which is on a different continent, you can actually turn a blind eye. You can it can also continue to take a hard stance towards the Taliban. You know? But Russia, China, Pakistan being bordering countries, they have to um, live with the reality, right? So how do you see that this alteration of this external environment to these countries? How do you see them responding? How do you see it changing their foreign policy? So I was going to probably give you guys a break right now so that you all can go think about that, and then we can come back and and there are also um, readings that I have in the media articles, the list of media articles for today that you can also draw on to look at. The one by Nikkei Asia on Too Big to Fall, China eyes Afghanistan investment amid fears of state collapse. That would be a good one to read if you want to just have a good summary, good overview of what's going on. Yeah. And then we can come back and watch these two videos. Yeah. And we can then have you fill this in and fill in your comments on Menti. Yeah. That good? Should I give you say about 20-25 minutes to think about these? You can take a